All right, welcome everyone. As you guys come on in, thank you for joining us. We'll have a chance for everyone to participate in the conversation today. That's part of the intention. But tonight I'd like to welcome you to a conversation with a good friend of mine, Miles Kessler, Dojo Cho in Tel Aviv for Integral Aikido. And we'll are preparing to do our yearly event in May, the Riviera Seminar, which is May 26th through the 28th, with a special event on the 29th. And the theme for this event is looking at the nature of wisdom, love, and power in the art of Aikido. And so tonight we thought we would give a chance to kind of go through those themes and allow people to share their perspectives and maybe uncover some of these core issues in the practice of what we're doing. And very happy to welcome all of you to join us for this conversation. This is being recorded and will be available online later on after we get it downloaded onto YouTube. But I'd just like to say welcome to Miles, and thank you for being able to make time in your busy schedule to join me and everyone here for a conversation on the nature of wisdom, love, and power in the art of Aikido. How are you doing tonight, Miles?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I was just wondering if it would be possible for the participants to open your cameras.
Sure.
It's almost like, it's almost like teaching from the stage and people like the group sits in the back row. And it's kind of like, you're like, who are we kind of teaching to? Patrick and I can have a great conversation just by ourselves, but it's just like I would ask everybody to move up to the front rows. Is it possible to open up your mics? Or maybe the mics are, Patrick, do they have the ability to, not their mics, excuse me, to open up their cameras?
Let's see here. Hold on.
Also, the chat is disabled.
All right. So
nobody can write anything.
Let me engage all those. So that's my bad. Here we go. Chat, start video, unmute. You're all good to go. Great. Thank you, Miles. That's my bad for. All right. Good.
So it's nice to see Renata. Nice to see
Deborah.
Hi, Deborah.
And Aline. And Maria, one of the new members in Aikido Montreux. Rafai. And I think Yo is there, huh?
Yo and JVR. Do me a favor and maybe put your name, JVR, if you can, or everybody, if you could just put your name and maybe where you're from. That would be helpful for us. So here we are. Wisdom, love, and power.
Yeah.
So Patrick, you want to tell us why you chose, because we spoke a lot about the theme.
Sure.
Patrick was kept in a way kind of spiraling around this one, like it was something that wanted to come forth.
I think, we had talked about it a little bit in our last event last year at the Riviera. I brought it up and I was reflecting on, what a balanced practice of Aikido would cultivate and where would those quality, how would we articulate those qualities that would show up in a balanced approach to Aikido? And obviously, I think both you and I, Miles, see Aikido as a wisdom tradition, and so I obviously thought wisdom was part and parcel of the practice of Aikido. Compassion, empathy, what people call as being love, is also a dimension that I felt was very important. And obviously, since Aikido is a martial art, the question of power or skill or impact, how we manifest these things in the world, would also be a question. And so I thought, these three components of wisdom, love, and power seem to encapsulate a balanced developmental process in the art of Aikido. And that for me, it seemed that if one of these were missing, if one of these components were missing in a person's development, it might be a sign that their practice wasn't necessarily as inclusive as it could be. and so I felt inspired by these three qualities, and in the past I've been a little bit allergic to looking at the question of power, because it can sometimes feed a person's sense of ego or a sense of uh, um, kind of a self-centered perspective when the question of power shows up. But I still, in the end, it felt like this was an important component to include, and I just felt that that maybe this year for the Riviera, that might be a good direction for us both to approach. Because as I dialogued with you, Miles, I think there was a lot of things that we agreed on, but also a lot of areas that we hadn't necessarily felt that we had mapped out, specifically around the question of power. And so I felt kind of inspired to say, okay, so what is that? What are we looking at? Because we're definitely looking at a martial art, and we're definitely looking at bringing a person into a more empowered state, whatever that might mean.
Right.
And if we're looking about empowering people, how do we define what that means, and how do we identify that? And so I think these three components could be considered as maybe three pillars of the development of an individual as they move through the art of Aikido. And I thought that and we could use other synonyms for wisdom, whether it's insight or understanding or clarity, and other synonyms for love, whether it's empathy, compassion, or a sense of intimacy, and obviously other synonyms for power. But I don't have anything for myself. I think this is it's kind of new territory we kind of explored in this fashion, and I thought it might be an inspiring moment for us to look at it together.
Well, I just have a few opening thoughts.
Sure.
Because you and we've been, whatever. What number is this going to be? Riviera Seminar?
Oh, it's gone beyond counting. I think we're like,
It's
yeah,
15 or more, something like
exactly.
that. Yeah. And then we did 10 years. We did the Dead Sea Seminar, and plus we did a lot of events. Anyways, Patrick and I know each other for getting close to 30 years.
Oh yeah, at least
more than 30 years. Yeah.
At least, yeah.
And we taught together in Japan, and et cetera, et
Right.
cetera. So we've been doing this stuff a lot. And in the latter decades, I'd say that our practice has, not just our practice, of course, our spiritual practice, but because of our spiritual practice, our Aikido practice and our Aikido teaching has more or less landed in the categories or the areas where we teach a lot about wisdom. This is a practice, like Patrick said, it's a wisdom tradition. So how is this a practice of wisdom? We've also see Aikido as an expression of love, love absolute or unconditional love. We see this as a spiritual practice that also encompasses love. And in a way, power has been implicit. Power, the empowerment type of power, the power that comes out of wisdom, the power that comes out of love, that has been implicit, but we never really spoke about power. Which has been an interesting kind of direction that we're going to look at this year. And for me, it's interesting because not everybody's interested in doing Aikido as a wisdom path. Completely fine. Everybody has their intention. Not every teacher is talking about Aikido as a wisdom path. Some teachers are teaching Aikido with a lot of wisdom, but they never say a word about it. Other teachers talk a lot about wisdom. They don't express it. But for example, not anybody I'm thinking of actually, but same thing with love. That love, when love comes online and as an expression of our Aikido or who we are in the world, there is a power to that. There's no question. But I would say that if there's no wisdom and no love in our expression of Aikido, then the power that comes from that is going to be a limited type of power. It's going to be physical. It's going to be strategic. It's going to be zero sum. In other words, I use my power to overcome you as a self-defense. Fine, Aikido can be practiced as a self-defense. As limited as that is, it can be practiced that way. But the main thing is that it's always zero sum. And in other words, you will never discover this kind of positive sum resolution that is Aikido's Aikido's birthright or Aikido's deeper purpose. You can't discover that without wisdom, tapping wisdom, expressing wisdom. You can't discover that without tapping into love and expressing love. positive sum.
Right.
And Paul Linden has the best quote from this, and it's a quote from that I think with love, if I'm not making a mistake. He says, love without power is no. First, he says, power without love is brutal. It's just brutal and violent. Power without love is brutal. Love without power, and I don't remember his exact word, but it's something like impotent. There's no potency to it. It's love without power is impotent.
Anemic, yes, something like that. Yeah.
And power without love is brutal. So that's what we're going to be, at least as I understand it, Patrick. That's kind of the area we're going to be looking at.
Right.
What is love? What is power with wisdom? What is power with love? And what is power when there's no wisdom and there's no love? And because as simple as that is for me, and maybe for you, and for sure I know Patrick as well, but maybe for you listening, as simple as that sounds, apparently it's not that clear for everybody. So
I think what we're looking at is in terms of the question, especially around wisdom. I think it offers us an opportunity to rewire the way we fundamentally identify ourselves, because the Aikido is based on, as you well know, Miles, and most of you who are listening know, that Aikido is based on a fundamental spiritual realization that life is one. And that realization can come either through logical, rational means of realizing we live in a systemic environment. And as the pandemic so adroitly demonstrated, we live in a system that is impacted by everyone on the planet. And so when we come to the realization that our welfares are tied, when we come to the realization that we live in a systemic environment, logically or spiritually, and in a direct realization that life is one event and I'm part of that event, that can change the way we function in the realm of conflict, in the realm of power. And it does change the way we fundamentally function in the realm of intimacy or love. And so I think wisdom is the doorway that opens us up to can open us up to different changes in the way we function along the lines of our emotional connection with each other and our physical or power connections with each other. And it's nice just looking and seeing Louis Jumonville, who's joined us for the conversation. It's great to see you, Louis.
Hey, man.
And a good friend of ours from our time in living together in Japan. So it's nice to have you, Louis.
Thank you.
Right. So I think this doorway into the wisdom, into the realization of unity, in the sense that the person comes up with the understanding that I am connected with all of life, that has a possibility for of changing or moving our center of gravity in relationship to how we function in conflict, how we function with another individual in conflict, and that I think that's a in the end could be just fundamentally brought down to a simple realization of non-duality, the spiritual realization that life is one. And I think that in and of itself, a movement towards that understanding would be, I think, the domain that Aikido helps facilitate in a person who's practicing the art. I don't know if you'd add anything to that, Miles. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily add anything to it. What is my take on what specifically?
In terms of the wisdom aspect of Aikido being the essential nature of the realization of unity. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the ground that Aikido offers.
Yeah, I mean, and this is also, whenever we're doing our I mean, just think back to your days as a beginner. Every beginner usually, okay, you're learning how to put your feet, you're learning how to fall down, you're learning how to do a roll, you're learning maybe how to do this technique, that technique, but what you're really learning from day one is how to organize yourself around your center. And to organize yourself around your center, you really have to drop into the present moment first, which is the mind, and you have to drop into the body, which is, the mind and the body. And in order to do, what prevents us from dropping into the moment is the mind jumping to the future, reflecting on the past, the body tense, freaked out, in stress, up in the shoulders, in survival instincts. And these things are perfectly natural, perfectly normal as a human being, but they're also all made up of identity. When we are an identity and we're faced with confrontation or conflict or survival situation, then the survival instincts will come up, and the survival instincts are triggered by fear. And, like the Upanishads said, where there is other, there too you shall find fear. Where there is a self, there's the beginning of all of our problems. And in order to do Aikido functionally, in order to actually, when I say functionally, I don't mean to have functional techniques, which is is important. But I mean to do it in a way that's aligned with and an expression of the deeper principles of the art. So your physical techniques are an expression of the principles of the art. In order to do that, the sense of self just has to relax. And, the way that we do that in Aikido, the way we do that in meditation, other spiritual practices would be a little bit different. But the way, generally speaking, the basic way that we do that in Aikido is through the practice of centering. We drop in and we center. And that's all about getting out of my sense of self, in a moment, suspending the need to control the future, suspending the need to ruminate on the past, and to start being present with what's arising inside of me. All of these survival instincts, they will run the show. In fact, they do run the show. The only way they don't run the show is when they're purified. And what purifies is a container of awareness. So these instincts can come up. They can do their thing. They can order like a wave of intensity come up. Oh my God, but I can still breathe. I can still have some space here. And they subside, and then they pass away, and we're left in awareness. So that's the first side. This is the wisdom side. The wisdom for me is really what Patrick is pointing to is the capacity to have a direct experience of reality, of this moment, that is not filtered by my historical self.
Sure.
So in other words, the identity. When the identity can relax and subside and fade to the background, then we can begin to be present in the moment. And since it's Aikido, which means it's relational, we can begin the love side of the street, which is through connection.
Sure. I think in what you're pointing to, I think in the art in and of itself, the way it's practiced, it brings us to the point where we're attempting to be in a physical harmony with another individual, and by opening up to that attempt to be in a physical harmony with another individual, we can stumble upon the experience of being in contact with that individual, even though we're not physically touching each other. So there's a certain sense of realizing a state of unity prior to physical contact. And that's realization, that experience can, if it's brought into understanding, can allow us to recognize that who I am exists beyond my physical boundaries, but I exist actually as a field of awareness, not as a localized identity, but as a state of being. And that state of being is, in a way, not separate. It's not in a way, it is not separate from its environment that it exists in. And Aikido can facilitate that discovery through its practices in a certain way, if the person is ripe or available or interested in leading into that. And I think through the physical practices, not just only through centering, but through the connection, as you mentioned, Miles, that we can realize that there is a connection which is already fundamentally present between myself and other. And that connection is actually not separate from who I am at the ground of my being. And that ground of my being, which is in contact with the environment that I'm in, is the second half of that center, because that center also includes a circle. And that circle is the world that I am in. So as I connect with center, I also connect with circle. And that circle is in a way, it's not separate from my own experience of being. And as I open up to that, my sense of being in face with someone, facing someone who feels as a threat or feels as another, is suddenly discovered as part and parcel of this state of being. It's not that there's a connection there which was fundamentally present, and that feeds that wisdom aspect, but then as it segues also into a direct emotional relationship with the world that I'm in, and that emotional relationship of with the world that I'm in is positive, it's life positive based. It's based on a positive affirmation of I am with you, I'm in contact with you, I realize I'm not separate from you. And my whole idea and my whole dynamic of being in a zero-sum game where in order for me to win, you have to lose, is realized as being maybe a too small of a container to work in the world that I'm in now. There's a larger container here, which recognizes that our fundamentally our welfares and our well-beings and our states of beings are tied and connected. And that opens up to that state of affinity, compassion, empathy, or love. And as the founder of Aikido, Sensei, had mentioned, that he had often referred to his Aikido as being the art of loving protection or loving power, so to speak. And he had mentioned that love was a fundamental nature defining quality of the art itself. And so it's there from the beginning in terms of how he brought it about, but it's so difficult to articulate as being something that can be pointed to as a developmental quality or understanding in the art. And this is one of the reasons why we brought this subject up. So Miles, when you feel that connection at that heart level, what we would maybe call the dimension of love, how does that manifest for you, or how did that emerge for you in your training or in your perspective?
I'm assuming you're talking about love absolute, unconditional love.
I'd like you to define that, because actually that's something that we can look at, because we're obviously not talking about a romantic experience of love between self
or
and
just
other.
personal. It doesn't have to be romantic, it can be
Personal,
personal.
right? Sure, right. So maybe say a few words about what you refer to as unconditional love.
Well, I mean, okay, so if we're going to talk about love, so there's lots of love. There's brotherly love,
Sure.
sisterly love. There's love of our family, of course. There's love of our children, love of our parents, etc.
Right.
Love of our, football team, love of our culture, love of romantic love, as Patrick was saying. And all of these things are beautiful. There's no question about it that they're beautiful. They're wonderful. Beautiful expressions of love. But we just have to recognize that they're limited. That's all. Because they're inclusive of the object of love, but they're exclusive of everything else. So they are conditional. And often when it's a human relational type of love, which is totally cool. I have lots of relations in my life. I just love these people. I love them in a personal way. But as long as it's relational, it's also very conditional. As long as they keep behaving and acting, and we have this kind of unspoken agreement, everything is good. Everything is good. But that's the trick with love, yeah? As you get closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to somebody in a personal way, all those personal little things start to come up, not just in them, but in me too. Of course it's them. Of course it's them. But I have to be fair here and say it's me too. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. No judgment about that at all, except just to understand that it's limited, that it's personal, it's limited, and it's conditional. Not a problem. But if that type of love is going to be involved with any type of, since we're talking about Aikido, any type of creative endeavor, in any type of, let's just say, conflict, or any type of dialectic where my boundaries and the other's boundaries start to rub against each other in a way that's unpleasant and stressful, then the resolution of that is going to be zero sum. It's going to be zero sum. It can't be anything else. It could be a passive aggressive type of, zero sum love, or it could be the sticky love, or it can be conditional, or it can be relational. It's like, oh no, I'm going to be a good uke for you as long as you're a good uke for me, and whatever the case it is. Again, no judgment. That's just the games that we play with those that we are love with in a personal way. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It just is what it is, and it's limited. So any Aikido that comes from there, it's going to be, it's going to be about you and your people, and then not about others and those people over there. Of course, Sensei wasn't speaking about that, and of course that doesn't get to the Takemuso Aiki. It doesn't get to the true gift of Aikido, the greater gift of Aikido, which is the healing of all conflict. That the resolution of any conflict, when we say positive sum, it means everybody's satisfied. And to be fully satisfied that a conflict is resolved, that means that I didn't have to give up anything, unless I realized that I was being a dick or something like that, and say, okay, maybe I can give that up. It's a good thing to give up. I want to be a better person. But in terms of having my perspective and how I feel, I don't have to give that up. You don't have to give that up. We heal in a greater perspective that it contains it all. That contains it all. And if we just look at Aikido, when I attack you, if you're technically forcing me in one way or another, I don't enjoy that. I mean, when I was a young guy, I used to like to do it a lot. I used to struggle and fight. I used to love it as much as the next young guy. But these days I won't do that. But I still love intense training. I still love hardcore training, but in a way where that's aligned with the resolution of conflict. And in that resolution, the conflict goes exactly where I wanted to go, not where me, Miles, the identified separate sense of self, wants to go, because that relaxes. I'm actually able, me and my partner, actually to align with the direction that the conflict wants to go. It automatically leads to resolution. That resolution, that positive sub-resolution is nothing. It's nothing if it isn't love. Why is it love? Because it's in a greater container. Everything, everybody is included, and it's unconditional. It's unconditional. Of course, it takes the right conditions to get there. We have to stop fighting. It's not that we have to stop fighting. We have to be responsible for our survival instincts, which are intelligence. Fight, flight, freeze is a basic intelligence. But if those are operating, you'll never reach a zero sum. Sure. So I need to be responsible for that. And since we're practicing in a dojo with other human beings who are also walking their path, and they're being responsible for their shit, then we actually have something where we can come together in a dialectic, creating that tension, that necessary evolutionary tension that is conflict. We both know it's conflict, but because it's being held, we're holding it with wisdom. It will allow the expression to come through in a way that's greater, more inclusive, as Patrick said, and completely satisfying. So in that sense, it's a positive sum. And for me, that movement into that resolution, and I don't know, when you taste it, you know it. When you taste it, you know it. That movement is the movement of love. That movement is the movement. It's like when a baby's born, like when a baby's conceived. Who knows? The reason people are having sex could be many reasons, but the conception is the universe conspiring to create, oh my God, another human being. And the same thing with the birth. That coming out is it's a creative advancement into novelty, something new, and it's love.
Sure. And I think that what you're pointing to in terms of it moving from a personal experience of love and how that functions to unconditional experience of love. For me, that transition is a realization of, to a certain degree, that ability to meet another person and to be able to meet the energies in conflict and to meet the situation in conflict without without taking those energies personally, and to a certain degree, actually meeting conflict as a universal human experience. And being able to meet conflict as a universal human experience still gives me that capacity to meet the other person as a human being rather than as a threat. And as I see the other person as a threat, of course, it charges that fight, flight, freeze natural intelligence mechanism that does exist within us. But if I can expand that capacity to meet those energies in an unconditional or universal fashion, then something else shows up, and that's that capacity to be creative and curious and to be engaged in a way that I include the other in this dynamic of being able to evolve into another experience of response. And that
and
other,
if I can just
Sure.
interject
Sure.
with what you said, it's not that things are not personal.
no,
Personal shit is coming up all the time, but there's a maturity of perspective that realizes, no, that karma, I know that karma is going to take me into the perpetuation of the same old shit. So we're able to just kind of suspend the being captured by that in myself. And even when I see it in the other person, make space, like your children, okay, they're acting out. Okay, let's give them a little space, let them process that. They'll get through it. And then we meet in this greater place of awareness and connection, which leads us to where you're saying, Patrick.
Sure. And as I know you realize, if my daughter has a fit, I don't take that personally. I can't take that personally. I meet her in that larger space so that I can actually look at her needs rather than fall into the drama that she might be suffering from, and being able to meet her and to be able to engage her in that larger context where I can say no, but at the same time, that no doesn't deny the love that I have for her. And that ability to have that connection with another human being, that we fall into conflict on that ground level, I am a human being with you, and that my empathy, my compassion, and my connection with you continues to exist, even as I manifest an experience or a position where I have to say no, or I have to manifest a particular position where I have to take a role in facilitating a change in the way things are going to move. And I acknowledge the other individual as being not separate, but there's still that misunderstanding that needs to be navigated, needs to be brought to the surface, where we can be able to come together as a system, as a relationship. And in way, for the way I often define Aikido is not necessarily looking at me protecting myself, but Aikido is a way for me to protect myself as an individual, but also to honor the relationship that I'm in with the other person. So how do I fundamentally practice in a way that I'm honoring myself, but I'm also honoring the relationship, which therefore includes the other person in that state of connection that I see I have with the other person. And that maybe can lead us into the next segment on what do we mean by the word of power? What does power have to do with that understanding, that wisdom, and that experience of unconditional love? How does power manifest from that place? Miles?
Well, not everybody here knows, but I have two young kids, two girls, 9 and 5, almost 10 and almost 6. And one of the greatest joys is to be able to kind of relive my childhood through movies. we're little by little going through the Star Wars movies. So forgive me if I'm going to bring in some Star Wars Jedi wisdom, which there's a lot of problems with the Star Wars movies. But one thing that they did get right was this idea of the dark side of the Force and the light side of the Force. And it would be wrong for us to say that there's not power in anger. There's not power in hatred. There's not power in jealousy. There's not power in deceit. All of these things do have power, and they can, but it's a type of power. It's zero-sum power. And it's a power over another person, or it attempts to have a power over another person. It can be overtly, like, aggressive power, using your power aggressively over another person. Or it could be covertly, kind of passive aggressively using your power to control others. And And again, that's just a human condition. That karma has been around for as long as probably amoebas, but it's certainly been around as long as human beings have been around, and it continues to perpetuate. So, you know, O-sensei had an awakening. He had an enlightenment. And he didn't have an enlightenment doing Aikido. He had an enlightenment, and Aikido was the expression of that enlightenment. And you just have to look at O-sensei. You see wisdom. You can just see it vibrating through his movement, through his being. You certainly see love. You see love vibrating through his being in the way he does art, expresses Aikido. But you certainly see power. A lot of power there, but nobody got up feeling abused. At least from the videos I saw. I wasn't around. But, and that's the thing. That's for me the key. That because there is the dark side of the force. But when the dark side of the force is used, the person that is using it feels superior, I would guess, because well, I don't have to guess. I know, because I've also done that. Maybe I still do it. But it's zero sum. My satisfaction is based on another person's satisfaction. My victory is based on another person's loss. My feeling strong is based on making sure the other person's weaker. And then the light side of the force, where we would all kind of certainly hope we are, is not based on that. It is equally as powerful. No, it's more powerful.
It's more, yeah. It's
infinitely more.
And physically
powerful.
More powerful in the end, yes.
Yeah, right. And it's not based, but what's beautiful about it is it's not based on another person's loss. It's not based on another person's dissatisfaction. It's not based on another person's losing out. I just said loss, but it's not based on any of that. It's not based. Even when there's the resolution of conflict, both people are satisfied, and not only just satisfied, but they are bonded in a greater love. At that dialectic, and here's the thing, Patrick, that it's like, this is what's so hard about this. It's hard enough just doing it with meditation or solo spiritual practice.
Yeah, of course.
It's so much harder when we're involved with another person, much more with people. Is that oh shit, I forgot what I was going to say. I forgot what I was going to say. Anyways, it's harder.
The senior moment there.
No, what was I saying? I was talking about oh shit.
You were saying it was so much harder. It's harder than
before that.
But I would
power.
I mean, I think to a certain extent, the power that you're referring to, I mean, how we reflect, how we relate to conflict, external conflict, and how we relate to addressing that external conflict, especially within the power dynamics of that, immediately gets transferred on how we relate to our own internal conflict and how we fundamentally relate to our own dichotomy inside our own self. And if we're going to fundamentally be able to have a congruent and coherent relationship to conflict on all levels of our being, we have to do something that's going to be, as you well know, integral, systemic, and being able to relate to conflict as an opportunity to bring these two halves to a greater understanding, than to use this as an opportunity for one half to somehow dominate or destroy or suppress another half. And this kind of dynamic, this realization of unity, kind of guiding the direction for the love to function as an expression of power in that moment of bringing the relationship to a greater balance, to a greater, as you had mentioned before, Miles, to an experience that where both people are elevated, and the possibility for the relationship to deepen and to evolve is there. Now, it's not necessarily a given that will always happen, but just entertaining that the possibility could be there is already a shift in consciousness that most people, I don't even think, could imagine. That me being in a conflict with the other person, resolving the conflict through Aikido, through this life positive, wisdom-based, loving protection, could bring the relationship to a better place is a life-changing realization, and can bring a tremendous amount to the plate, in terms of tremendous amount onto the table in terms of how we relate to the other in when we feel threatened and when we feel challenged by that person, by that situation that we're in.
I guess there's just one more thing that feels
Sure.
important to presence here, at least for me. I mean, there's a lot of things that are coming up actually, but we're practicing a martial art, right? And most people, I would, maybe this is just a gross generalization, but my experience is that women tend to come to martial arts for empowerment. Sometimes they're trying to get power, like to overcome and really be able to win a fight or not get beat up, or self-defense. But usually women are coming for empowerment. Men are coming more for power. That's, again, it's a generalization, but that tends to be the difference in the genders, or rather in the sexes. But since it is a martial art, there is this kind of looking for a way to be powerful. And the trick is with Aikido, and this is what makes Aikido such a unique martial art and damn near impossible, is that while we're learning how to be powerful, the way we stand, the way we center, the way we connect, the way we create an angle, the way you do a technique, the way you perfect the technique, while we're learning to do that, which is a secondary part of the art, it's not the main part, but it's important, super important. While we're learning to do that, we're also trying to learn how to let go of our confused power. The type of power where I put my power over the other person. I get the effect with my body. I get the effect maybe with a strategy. I get the effect with some type of trick. All that is powerful, but we have to learn how to let that go. And in a way, and this is what's really, really hard for the ego, for the sense of self, we are investing in loss. So we can learn all these amazing techniques in Aikido and just keep getting more and more powerful. You'll get better, you'll get faster, you'll get stronger until you get older. And when there's a physical diminishing return, you'll get not so better, not so faster, not so stronger. Your power will start to slip away. And that can be tough for if the ego built up that power, when it starts to slip away, it's tough for the ego when it starts to slip away. But that's not really where the real treasure of Aikido is at. The real treasure of Aikido is investing in loss. We try to let go of all that stuff while we're doing these techniques, while we're doing these exercises, while we're practicing, and hopefully while we're tapping into expressing and organizing around the principles where the true power is coming from. And when we invest in loss, if we don't invest in loss, it's the Darth Vader path. You can get powerful, but you'll just make the Darth Vader move. Your shadow is going to follow you wherever you go, and it's going to create a lot of karma. But if we're able to kind of, not make that Darth Vader move and purify the sense of self, and in other words, my sense of self starts to recede to the background, it's still good, but I realize the expression of the principles. There's a greater, that my love for power is superseded by my love for the truth. And if I love the truth, that means I have to let go of everything that's not true to the greater intention of the art. When that happens, and when we do invest in loss for a while, incrementally, very subtly at the beginning, but a deeper type of power will come through.
Sure.
It's not based on physics, it's based on principles. And
I think what I would add to that, there's a recognition or appreciation that capacity to be powerful with another person rather than powerful against, to be powerful with another person, to be able to facilitate a resolution that honors the relationship, is fundamentally much more satisfying than power over another person just in order to get my way or to get my desire fulfilled. That getting my desire fulfilled and being powerful over another person in order and either destroying or suppressing, or in some level controlling the other person so that I can win and the other person lose, is recognized as being unsatisfying way to function in a relationship, especially if that relationship is a relationship that we're having with a long-term individual. And it's
What makes it unsatisfying, Patrick?
Because
Because
it's
you're really onto something there. So
it's
what is it
it's
that when we feel unsatisfied, why are we unsatisfied?
because first off, it's unsustainable because it's not it doesn't acknowledge the other individual's state of being.
Yeah.
Second,
It excludes them.
Excludes them. Second,
Yeah.
we're unable to celebrate with the other person because how do you celebrate your win when the other person has sacrificed themselves in order for you to win? So there's no celebration. You're alone in that moment. And the relationship fundamentally doesn't evolve because in order for your will or your desire to have achieved its goals, the other person has lost their own physical integrity or emotional integrity for that.
And when they lose,
we lose. It becomes obvious
completely. Yeah.
And that's something.
At a certain point, it becomes obvious.
Sure.
That's the turning point, because for a long time it's not obvious.
Right. But
I'm just talking developmental maturity.
And
not just being an adult.
Right.
Being adult is one thing, but even for adults, it has to go a bit further.
Sure.
But then when we get it, oh my God.
Yeah. And that's the driving force, is because it just is so much more when we appreciate that shift, it is so much more valuable and so much more satisfying to be able to walk out of the other end of the conflict in a state of unity with the person that you were in, and the relationship is deeper and fuller and greater, and there's something about that which is so much more life affirming, as well as in a way essentially necessary in these times of collective or systemic crisis that we're experiencing on the planet, because there's no way that a zero-sum game approach will ever satisfy the challenges that we are actually facing collectively right now. So Aikido offers that opportunity to be empowered in a systemic or integrated experience of ourselves, both as individuals and collectively. And that's why I find it so incredibly essential in looking at the questions that we're facing. So we have a few minutes now. We have 10 minutes.
Let me just say last thing, and then we'll take the last thing I would say is that any real conversation of power in Aikido, if it doesn't include wisdom, if it doesn't include love, you're just not getting to the point.
Sure. But
you don't need Aikido to have that conversation.
Right. But likewise,
it could be hockey or something. It doesn't
matter.
But
likewise, if we're just looking at wisdom and love, and there's no shift in the person's capacity to touch and to meet the world around them, if they're not centered, if they don't have that depth of being that they can handle the stress and the pressures of change and threat, then we're not
ineffective.
It's also blind. It's also to a certain degree without its own center.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of people here who have a lot, I know, to share. So I'd love to hear if we can open up the mics, and perhaps if you don't mind raising your hand electronically or physically if you want to, if you don't know how to do that electronically, if you'd like to share something and to join the conversation, please do so. Would love to hear. Maybe we could start off with Luis Jomonville. Luis, do you want to jump in and just share a little bit of what your experience is with this question?
Good to see you, Luis.
Good to see you. Actually, I'm kind of overwhelmed with just hearing the depth and breadth of your two conversations, so my mind's kind of silent. It's such a broad and deep topic, and it's such a rich point in my life right now, because both of you have mentioned multiple times what happens in the meeting on the mat when trauma responses come up in the individual. And I'm in the second year of the somatic psychotherapy professional certification, so I'm really deep into the fight, flight, freeze, and all the nuances that occur with that. And at the same time, I'm almost certified as a Vedic priest now, so I'm really making connections, and I'm starting to write a book on the Vedas and somatic and Aikido, and so it's just the power of love and power. Those two topics are so vast. I'm just gonna leave it to the rest of you guys to talk about it right now. I'm just gonna like too much to digest.
Okay.
If
But
something arises,
wonderful hearing you and seeing you guys.
Yeah.
if something arises, please
Maybe
jump.
some other time because if I start talking, all the time will be used up. Won't be able to stop. So I'm going to be polite. Nice to see all you guys. Actually, yesterday was my birthday, so coming on today was like a present to myself to
Uh,
Oh
all
wow!
right.
That's
Happy
good.
birthday, my
come
friend.
out into the world a little more.
Yeah.
I'm proud of my self-imposed sadhana. So
Cool. Okay.
coming
Great.
out.
Good.
Later on in the afternoon, I'm part of the International Aikido Youth Federation, the North America Internet IAF Youth Work Task Group for North America. Kind of broadening my horizons here.
Right on.
Mm.
Right
So
on.
nice to
Cool.
see you guys.
Good. Nice to see you too. Thanks, Louis. Would anybody else like to join in or share what's coming up from this conversation?
Yo's mic is open. I don't know if he wants to say something.
Yes. Yo.
Yeah,
Go for it.
well, I don't have that much to say, but about a year ago, Patrick, you mentioned these three items: power, wisdom, and love, and it felt pretty strange to me. I couldn't feel the connection between power and wisdom or love. And just this week, I said to one of my pupils, well, do you have the power to love the other one? And do I have the power to love or to share wisdom with the others?
Mm.
And that made it, well, I still have to look for the words and to the rational understanding, but in my heart, it's okay. I use that power of, I have the power to love or to share wisdom or to care or to, that's my power. That's not physical power. That's not a power to overpower someone else, but there is this deep natural power to share. That's it.
Nice. Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you, Yo.
You're
Excellent.
welcome.
Cool.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Surely.
You know, and I mean that's a
I
little bit
know,
of
I know a Marvel
comic
quote
book
had to
wisdom.
come up here sometime. But...
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, sure. Come on, what? Anyways, it's a bit of a comic book quote, but you know, it's really what it means, and it's what Yo's talking about. It's when you have the perspective to see a greater way of being, more inclusive. When I say greater for win-win-win, greater for me, greater for you, greater for the others, and greater for the whole.
For the we.
Yeah, the we or even the earth, whatever. When you have that perspective, that perspective is a power. If you do not act or advocate for that perspective, then it's kind of an abdication, or it's impotent. So that's we, you know, at that point, it may take a little time to live into that perspective, but once we kind of align with it, it just comes through us. It comes through us.
Right.
You can't not say something. You can't not act when life is requiring action or speech, engagement.
Anybody else would like to share and join? Deborah, it's nice to see you. Would you like to share something?
Yeah, it's nice to see everyone. I was just thinking that power is about having the ability to make choices. Kind of picking up on what I think Miles said, and also that maybe the word power like confuses people in a way.
Right.
Because,
exactly.
And I was thinking, like, some time ago, I did some academic study in international development, and they talk about capabilities. And that's kind of like a technical thing, but in a way, if we were to replace the words power in our minds sometimes in this discussion with capability, maybe that comes closer to what I think we're talking about than power as it's usually thought of. Because it's about to me the capability to make choices, the capability to influence a situation in a positive way,
Sure.
to make change, to heal others, to heal ourselves.
Mhm.
So that, and in a way, I think also like my other reflection is just having practiced with both of you, though not for a while, I feel like sometimes you guys kind of assume the power in a way that like without, like, it's interesting that you guys are talking about it now, because I feel like you,
Right.
what you teach and what you do and the explorations that you do, it like assumes a certain level of just kind of familiarity and competency in the art, in Aikido, that, you know, you kind of expect people to sort of pick up. And so it's interesting because it's like, I mean, that does, I think, and I think that comes easier to some people than others, but it's interesting to, yeah, because I've been reflecting also that it doesn't necessarily just come. It is also something that needs to be worked on in some way, like mentally and emotionally and spiritually, as well as just physically.
Yeah, Patrick,
sure.
I'll just make a quick comment about that,
Yeah.
because I wouldn't say that that I assume the
Mm.
power. Like here in my dojo, working with people day to day, I mean, I kind of get to know my students and I get to know where they're at. And sometimes it is, forgive the metaphor, but it's kind of like spoon feeding. You know, you take them by the hand, you walk them through, and you 5 years later, you look back and say, hey, look at this perspective that we've traversed here. Then they can actually assume that as well. I'm not fooled that thinking that they got it. It's okay, but that's how we learn. First, we see it in another, and like, what the heck's going on? And it rocks our world a little bit. Maybe we taste it, but because of the other person, like a guru, when you do satsang or with a teacher, you get some transmission, and then when the teacher's gone, it's gone. But then you've got your practices. You do your practices, develop the competencies, or to awaken the capacity, then the capability, then the competency where you get skilled at it. But it's dependent on those practices. If you fall off your practices, you lose that perspective. You lose that quote unquote power. But if you continue on the long term, then it becomes internalized, Deborah. And the internalization is really where things start to change. And once it's internalized, you don't really need the teacher. Of course, you love and have so whatever are devoted to your teacher, but you don't need them to access that. It's become, the teacher has become internalized. The power, spiritual power, love have become internalized, and you don't need the teaching. You don't even need the practices. You may still do all that stuff. You still may be in relationship with your teacher, but it's become internalized. Then it's just an expression. But you have to understand that process could take somebody 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. It could take 30 years. It could take 30 lifetimes to go through that. Who knows? That's all karmic.
Sure. I think in what you said though, Deborah, is very insightful, and I think it's nice to receive that kind of feedback. And from my perspective, I think to a certain degree, I see myself as kind of helping introduce to people what they're capable of. And then, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to access that capacity individually, but I can facilitate that I can help
That's
facilitate a moment where they go, holy shit, I can do that. I can
As
do
our
that.
teachers introduced to us.
Yeah. And to be able to engender that moment where they get a taste of that. And then the process of actually reaffirming it, organizing the way we cognitively see that, how we feel about that emotionally, and how we express that physically takes time. And some people it take less time, some people take longer time. But introducing
Some
that,
people it's immediate.
yeah, sure. Some people there can be those people that drop into it and they suddenly
Boom.
they've
Life
tasted
has
it,
changed.
and that's enough. And that's the mystery of it. But you're right, there can be sometimes I think that's part of the reason why I brought this question up, because I think
Yeah.
it's something that we've assumed everybody
Yeah.
kind of already understood what we were talking about, and that it's important that we bring this out to a little bit more of a transparent type of communication, because actually, to a certain degree, I'm assuming what I know what I'm talking about, and actually I'm not so clear I know what I'm talking about. This is part of the reason I wanted to engage this conversation with Miles, because he's such a great feedback.
Yeah. And also we rarely use the word power, rarely, certainly when we're teaching together, because of that confusion you're talking about, Deborah. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
But when Patrick kept pushing this, we went through a couple of weeks and he wanted to bring it in. I was like, but it's not, power's not my thing. It's not my thing. And then it's like listening to it more. It's like, well, yeah, let's clarify that. Let's clarify the confusion. Let's bring it in.
Sure.
So we make a clarity between what the anyways, the
Yeah,
dark side of the force and the light side of the force.
Sure. Let's finish up. We're closing up, but Renata, I see you have your hand up. If you want to just share something as the last at the last moment, that would be great. Can you unmute? There you
go.
go.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to say that I like the inclusion of the word power, because there's a feeling side to it. And feeling powerful in itself, I guess, is neutral, but pretty important to get started with what we decide to, or what we are what we have the capacity to do. And it can be the good or the bad kind of reaction, but we need to have a belief in ourselves, which is related to power, a belief in possibilities, in the possibility to change the situation, to influence it at all. And this is what Aikido has taught me too. And then it has kind of sparked the dream of, the positive way.
Right.
But it wouldn't have been possible without power.
Yeah. Nice, Renata. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great way to end our conversation tonight, because I think it brings it down to a very essential nature, that if we have lost our capacity to believe in ourselves, or to have the faith that our impact can be positive in the world around us, then we truly are, in a way, have lost our potency, and we feeling impotent with the world around us, and that's where our perspectives can collapse. And when we sustain our ability to have faith in our capacity to meet the world, then possibilities, what's possible, what we might be able to, how we influence, how we touch, how we meet the world, the possibilities of what we can manifest are without limit. And that's really essential in the world of Aikido.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, I just want to, again, thank all of you for coming on and sharing this conversation, and your presence with this question about the nature of wisdom, love, and power in the art of Aikido. And if you are inspired to join that physical exploration and that dynamic on the mat, I will just mention again our Riviera Seminar, which will be happening May 26th to the 28th, with another special event on Monday, the 29th. If you would like to engage those 4 days, you are more than welcome. You will be greatly welcome to join us and to take part in another year's investigation of what Aikido is at the level of who we are as human beings. And I just want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you, Louis Jumonville, for sharing your space here with us, and thank you to my good friend Miles for taking the time out to engage in this conversation and to make the make this possible for us to be able to do together. So thank you, Miles. Anything you want to end before we say
I would
goodnight?
like to finish with the words of Nisargadatta Maharaj,
Okay.
who said, in an expression of truth, he said that wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything. And my life is a river that runs through these two banks.
Sure.
And that is powerful.
Yes, absolutely. Great.